Good evening, everyone. Back again with another Premier Pundits Live podcast. Of course, it's me, Ben Dinnery, your host, and my esteemed friend, colleague, co-host. My on-screen hubby. It's Mr. Jason McKenna.
Oh
How,
wow,
how are you, my friend?
we banged it up a notch there.
Yeah, yeah.
On-screen husband. Wow.
I consider that because I see you more than practically and speak to you more than most other people. So what the hell?
Oh, so is this like a polyamorous relationship now? Because obviously, with the wife as well. But does she even know? I mean, it's a good question.
Uh,
But thank
I
you.
mean, does she even watch the podcast? I know who does watch the podcast, by the way. Callum. Good evening, Callum. Thanks for joining us. Bang on the money, my friend. 8:31. Very, very impressed.
Yeah, I love it.
Jason,
Yes.
what have we got on store tonight?
Yeah, so thanks as always, Ben, for having me on. This is a great kind of Premier Pundits. We're talking all about what we should be looking at in the Premier League. We've got the injury news, we've got some data tactics, and then, of course, we'll be talking about captaincy choices and transfer plans as well. I've got a couple of interesting transfer targets to talk about in terms of the data section, the tactics section, but I think there's a lot of big news in terms of injuries, and just a few that have come to my mind is Aguero, Antonio, the big one today, Digne, Zaha, and then Keita as well, because it might affect Nico Williams playing this weekend. So let's start off with Aguero. What kind of news do we have on his return? Because he's actually quite a hot topic in terms of the FPL community. Low ownership, and he could bang now with these amazing home fixtures for Manchester City.
Look, I've had a few questions with regards to Sergio Aguero just today. And a lot of people like yourself, I think they've got their eye on Sergio as being a little bit of a differential. He's probably at his lowest price point in a long, long time. Do I think he'll start? No, I don't. I'm laying it right on the line. Uh,
Ooh, ooh.
Obviously, we're talking about almost 5 months cumulative time spent on the sidelines. First, we had that knee injury, the surgery. Returned for had 3 starts in the week, and then suffered that setback with his hamstring. You know, if Gabriel Jesus wasn't fully fit, then yes, I could see Pep taking a slight risk with the Argentine as he did the first time around. But given the fact that Jesus is available and also, Aguero's already suffered that setback, I think he's just going to handle him and kick gloves, and he's going to really just, look to integrate him very slowly, build up those minutes because we're coming into a very busy fixture period. Christmas is like no other in terms of the footballing calendar, and the build up this season that we've had has been like no other. Now, if we were to lose Aguero again to another, which was a fairly minor hamstring injury, if the truth be told, that kept him out for nearly a month. That month could potentially put him out for maybe 10, 12 games overall. And then that leaves you with Gabriel Jesus, and then that leaves Pep with some major problems in that front line. So for me, it's a case of just bringing Aguero back nice and easy, and I expect him to start on the bench again this weekend.
And that sounds like sensible advice to the community as well, because when players come back from these long-term injuries, they don't always come to life as well. Obviously, Aguero is world class and he kind of transcends fixtures, but historically speaking, he has been almost managed until this season, which I thought was very strange as well. Pep playing him almost, I think, out of desperation. And you can kind of see why this season, because the team have really lacked in goals. But a team that has done all right without their front man up front is West Ham. But I am really, really excited with Mikel Antonio. I can't wait for him to get back into that West Ham team. Allaire has done well as a stopgap, but nothing has hit the heights of Antonio. And I think Bowen and Fornals, with their attacking outputs as well, have kind of suffered a little bit. They put good underlying data, but they haven't hit the heights of when Mikel was in the team. What's his news coming back? When is he going to have a likely return, Ben?
Yeah, so again, this is another one that's popped up on quite frequently on my timeline. And these are the nuances between maybe seeing a player on the training pitches, maybe listening and understanding to maybe what players are posting on social media and what's actually happening between the scenes. We've seen Mikel Antonio train ahead of game week 9. So he trained ahead of their last game. I'm trying to recall who that was. Um, Crystal Palace, Burnley. Oh, another one. But he did train ahead of that game, and he actually posted on some social media content that he was fit and injury free. Now, quite rightly, that got the community quite excited. However, we obviously seen the fact that he was omitted from the matchday squad altogether. And David Moyes, we alluded to it last time, David Moyes decided to err on the side of caution, again, probably with one eye on upcoming fixtures and what's been happening, and just kept him out of the firing line just for another week. But again, those extra 7 days could pay dividends. So as long as there hasn't been any niggles or setbacks with Antonio, I fully expect him to be the matchday squad. Now, for me, and I answered this question, like I said, the other day, and on my predicted lineups piece, I actually put West Ham down as an unchanged starting 11, which may come as a bit of a surprise, but I'm a firm believer that you don't change your winning formula. Yes, the likes of Haller, Antonio is a major upgrade, but these players deserve their chances. I think he got the goal as well last time out. He needs that confidence and the belief from the manager. So, when eventually Antonio does return to the side and Haller needs to be, brought in from the bench, he's still got that confidence that the manager's instilled in him. He doesn't want to feel as if he's just a bit of a bit part player, and maybe just being disposed of as soon as Antonio's anywhere near fit. I think it'll be sensible management from David Moyes. We've seen that in game week 9. So for me, West Ham unchanged with Mikel Antonio on the bench would be my call.
And that won't be bad news as well, because I think Antonio will probably be a fairly good long-term pick, because again, he's somebody, especially in Project Restart, but also this season, he scored against anybody and everybody. So I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of returns quite healthily, but managed as well. So another one to maybe not rush into your fantasy teams, but a huge blow for the community. And this is why we always hi there, her CYT. Great to see you there. I thought you were waving at me for a second there, Ben. But in terms of it, Digne was one of the most transferred in players this week. This is why we always say wait till the last minute. Obviously, price rises are a right bind. They're really annoying. But that 0.1 million that you're saving could cost you 4 points this week now, because you've got to get Digne out. Now, this seems to be almost a bit of a shocker one. Training ground injury. And what I've heard, but you're better to kind of facilitate the conversation here, is at least a month out. That's going to be a lot of games there, Ben.
Look, I want to suggest it's probably a little bit longer than that. The story originated from France. They broke the news that Lucas Digne has suffered what appears to be quite a serious training ground injury. We don't know if that was maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. He's been for scans. But what I would say at this point in time, scans can prove to be a little bit inconclusive, depending on swelling around the joint. The imaging mightn't be 100%, so they mightn't, know 100% what's going on in there. We hadn't had anything official from the club until around about 5 o'clock this evening. Now, Everton have actually confirmed that Digne has suffered a setback and he is scheduled for surgery on Monday, all being well. Now, the difference between non-invasive treatment, as opposed to maybe going under the knife, could be significant in terms of a time frame and return to play. I would suggest that initial timeline that was floated by the French press of around about 2 months isn't unrealistic. We could be looking at around about maybe 8 to 12 weeks. But what I would say, and this is always the caveat, there's no fixed time frame. Players may suffer similar injuries, but their response to treatment, the surgeon, the type of rehab, how that progresses can be completely different, how the body responds. What early doors, they want to get the ankle moving again. They want to get full range of movement. They want to make sure that there's no swelling in and around that joint. All of these things can inhibit recovery along the way. So, quite rightly, the club aren't willing to put any kind of timeline at the moment, but we're looking at early 2021 at this stage.
Goodness.
What I would say, medical staff, got a really good group down at Everton, and if we just cast our mind back to more or less this time last year, I think it was with Andre Gomez. He suffered what looked to be a pretty horrific ankle injury in that tackle with Heung-min Son. Initially, the papers are all over and they ruled him out for the season. And we actually seen him come back, I think it was in and around February. It's touching around about 100 to 110 days, if I recall correctly. So, look, it's never straightforward going under the knife because there's so many influencing factors that can determine the recovery process. But, if we said maybe 8 to 12 weeks, then that's certainly realistic at this stage.
Well, that will be a warning to the community as well, because Everton have looked better with Digne in the side. We've just seen Richarlison return. It's going to be one to keep an eye on, because I was quite hot on the Everton assets of Calvert-Lewin. Maybe Richarlison and Rodriguez, that they're kind of staple, almost template players, the T word there, or essential, the E word, which we don't like here on the Premier Pundits.
Can I just interject there with the T word, as I say? Look, and I think James has joined. Good evening, James. But Hersey, YT, Hersey has dropped the T word and he's dropped in a tip.
Oh.
He said, what, 89? I mean, wow. I appreciate that. So,
thank you very much, Hersey.
I appreciate that. We need a little bell. That's what we need. Every time we get a tip, we need to ring a bell. Jay, but sorry, I really, really appreciate that, Hersey. Thank you, very, very kind. Thank you.
That is very kind. And you asked if we're all right. Well, we're doing very grand right now. And in terms of the info, we hope we're giving you a good value for money for that £1.89. But let's move it then on to Keita's injury. And I think this is an interesting tactical one, because obviously when Keita was injured at the weekend, Milner went in to fill that position because that is more what he's suited to in kind of his play style. And then Nico Williams came on for a short little trip onto the pitch, but he still played a fair few minutes. And then in the end, at his price point, if he can be confirmed for a few games, I think other people in the community might be looking at him. So what kind of news do you have there, Ben?
Jurgen Klopp was very coy midweek ahead of the Atlanta game in terms of those players who were currently being assessed and treated down at the new training complex. He singled out one player who was nearing a return. He wouldn't name that player, but we know that they have several players currently sidelined. I think it's 8, if I recall off the top of my head. Now, we do know that Jordan Henderson isn't too far away. He's been training away from the main group in the gym up until this point, but he was back outside on the training pitches today. So we know that he isn't going to be too far away. Thiago Alcantara, again, he's a player that they're assessing on a daily basis, week to week. And there's a suggestion that he won't be too far away. So, reading between the lines of what Jurgen said, it sounds as if Keita won't be available this weekend, although we have a press conference on Friday, obviously, to confirm that. Keita is a concern because he's a player who undoubtedly has a lot of talent, but since his arrival, he's been picking up, just a lot of little niggles, setbacks, muscular issues that have really sort of inhibited his progress since arriving at the club. Just when he seems to be stringing a few games together, he's reaching his level of performance, he suffers another setback. And this is a prime example of where you would expect or you would hope Keita to step to the fore and deliver for Liverpool, and really show what he's capable of doing. But because he has another injury, he's just not in a position to be able to do that.
And it's a real shame in terms of Keita, but also it sounds a little bit risky to be going towards Nico Williams. But I want to talk about some of the players that I don't think are too risky, or the teams. And one of the big ones, and spoiler alert for people tuning in, but you've already done a transfer this week. Do you want to tell people what this is so unlike you, Ben, and this is why I'm still suspicious that you're actually Ben Dinnery, your French cousin, so Benjamin Dinnery.
Yeah. I heard he's a Chelsea supporter, by the way. Jason is an Arsenal fan. If you want to, if you want to get your digs in, I'm Newcastle, so I'm well out of the equation anyway. You thoroughly deserved those 3 points last weekend. But yes, I mean, so regular followers of the stream or through social media will know that I'm not really one for pulling the trigger early on transfers. I like to sort of digest, take all the news in. I try to keep my emotions out of those key decisions ahead of any game week, which is why I like to maybe leave a day or 2 or 3. I wildcarded in game week 9, and suffice to say, and I have actually seen others quote the fact that, unquote, is this the worst wild card ever? was one quote I actually seen.
Oh, goodness.
And given the points return and my game week rank, which was at least, I switched off. I don't even know if it was the final one, but I was at least down to 6.5 million. It was possibly the worst one ever. So I reacted, and I brought in Diego Jota. So I was very pleased to see him on the bench midweek. That's a good sign for me that he'll start this weekend. Obvious concerns would have been, Mo Salah's back in contention. Will Jurgen Klopp go with the 4? The Mane, Salah, Firmino, and Jota. But he looks nailed down there. And given the form that he's been in and the goals that he's been grabbing, I think he fully deserves that place in the Liverpool lineup.
I feel kind of bad though, because I was the one that advised you on this wildcard, so maybe people are insulting me and you at the same time there, Ben. I just can't believe that. I mean, the team is good. I like the team. I think, it maybe knee-jerkism, not seeing the long term, and also they're forgetting that you are the template buster. You kind of come in, you find some targets, you were one of the first people on Harry Kane, you were there before it was popular, you were super hipster about it. So I feel partly to blame, but also I'm proud that in the next few weeks you will get huge points and people will be regretting for saying that. But I like Diogo Jota. I think he's a good choice at his price point as well. We have seen a price rise, but still shouldn't put you off. I mean, at that price point, ridiculous value for money if you can get a Liverpool forward. Just sensational stuff. And I like his individual data. He obviously came to the Liverpool team a little bit late in terms of fitness. He wasn't there. And since he has been playing, 4 goals, which is a great return. But he's always in and around the box, which is what I quite like. 13 shots in the box. He's had 10 shots on target, and he's got a 2.9 XGI. Obviously, a little bit above his 4 goals. But historically, he has been a streaky player. And I think one of the things is, I call him baconish because he's streaky. And I think that, owning him at the right time, he's a little bit like Vardy. If you can jump on the Jota train, when he hits that form, you can do really well because he seems to carry it over for a few days. But I also have another point that maybe, the fact that he is in a better team, maybe he can continue that really good run of form for a bit longer. So I think at his price point, he's worth the risk. Whether he doesn't play or he does play isn't too worrying as well, because he'll probably come on either a little bit refreshed and make an impact on the game, or if he's totally rested, you'll have other players coming off your bench, because at his price point, he facilitates other people's moves. You'd be moving either Tielemans or Ross Barkley out, and if they don't play, you're not too worried, is my kind of point there. So I like Diogo Jota a lot. And who did you take out then for Diogo to come in?
Reluctantly, I had to go for Tielemans, and the reason I went for Tielemans is because my next move will be to get rid of Martinez. And again, this is on the advice. This is your advice again, and I do like the pick was to upgrade with Fabianski.
Yeah.
So the only way that I could facilitate that move, because the obvious choice would have been Ross Barkley. We know that he's probably going to miss at least 2 games, possibly 3. So the obvious choice would have been, to ditch Ross Barkley, but I just couldn't have done it in terms of the funds. But I've got a fairly deep and strong bench that I'm happy with. So, I've got players to come in to cover Ross Barkley for a few weeks. And so that was the sort of rationale behind that, even though, I was quite sweet on Tielemans as well. I was very disappointed last weekend at Anfield. I shouldn't be really against the champions, but he came in with so much promise after his performances for Belgium during the international break, and that just got the juices flowing. And I thought, this is it. But, Leicester were a little bit disappointed at Anfield. I think they were taught a little bit of a lesson. They were put on the place by Jurgen Klopp's men. And it's the hope, isn't it, that kills you, because we looked at that game. We've seen how many players Liverpool had out, including, 3 key members of that back line. And we all thought, well, this was it. If Jamie thought he was going to fill his boots, and it just didn't materialise.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was, I backed probably a draw in that game. I was thinking it might be a 1-1. I didn't think it'd be that high scoring. And then Liverpool just came out and showed everybody, don't doubt. People like Mane, Diogo, Firmino, they were just sensational in that game, and without Salah as well. Now, just quickly before I get into more kind of discussion points, and you can bring up some of yours, Ben, as well. I'm sure there's players or teams that you want to talk about. But Hersey YT has said he's hoping, as a Chelsea fan, that everybody is fit for Sunday against Spurs. So is there any kind of underlying news there that maybe you can relay to Hersey?
There is, but what I would say just before kick off, now my screen has actually went blank. And because I'm the lead host, I don't want to mess on with anything too much. So as long as my audio and visual is coming through absolutely fine, I'll just continue.
Looking as gorgeous as usual, Ben.
Yeah, you can just pick up anything in the chat. My board is just went a little bit funny. But yeah, Frank Lampard. Basically, we're expecting Chelsea to have a clean bill of health. The one question mark would have been with regards to Christian Pulisic. Now, he didn't travel to France midweek. Instead, he opted to remain at Cobham to do some fitness work. Now, he will be available. Whether Frank decides to, pick the US international remains to be seen. I certainly wouldn't expect to start, but a possibility of being included in the matchday squad in the 18 is a strong possibility. And again, we're talking about players who, at this stage of the campaign, heading towards the Christmas fixtures, will be looking to be getting integrated very slowly. Build up that foundational strength, that core fitness, build up those minutes, so when the games are coming thick and fast over Christmas, then hopefully all of these players are at optimum level.
Well, that will be good news there for Hersey Whiteen. He's confirmed that he can see and hear us as well. As I said there, Ben, you're looking fantastic as always, glowing, lighting up. It's a bit
surreal just staring at a computer screen and nothing being there. But like I say, I don't want to mess on with it just in case we lose the feed. So we'll be on regardless.
It might be a loose connection at the back. If you need help, then I'll give you a little call afterwards. But let's move on to one of the interesting underlying datas that I actually uncovered this week. I'm not sure if many people will make this move, but it's just one that I want to throw out there, and maybe he will do well in his current run of good fixtures. And it's Aston Villa frontman Trezeguet. Now, this is an interesting one. You might roll your eyes, people listening, you might be thinking, God, why is he even talking at him? But at 5.3, I think that it's interesting that he's in the top 15 for XGI this season, more so than Rashford, Jota and Sterling. But he has 17 shots in the box, so he's getting in good positions, and he is yet to score. Now, this might be due to his quality. He might not have scored because obviously he isn't the best of players, but I think he's got a goal or two in him with good fixtures and that price point. 0.9% ownership. That is the definition of a maverick and a differential. I don't hate a little punty move, to 5.3. That's not bad as a midfielder. People have lots of players in their team that they kind of don't have to play every week, and at his price, nearly basically 5 mil, there's quite good fixtures coming up for Aston Villa. I don't see why it's not worth a little bit of a gamble there, Ben.
I think he was somebody that cropped up, certainly on my timeline back during Project Restart. I think his underlying stats at that point were quite good as well. It just didn't come to fruition in terms of his outputs on the pitch. Didn't necessarily reflect, a worthy sort of FPL asset. I know what you're saying. Aston Villa, for me, I don't want to get too deep in that squad. They've had a great start, don't get me wrong. Some of the stats in at the price point are really appealing, but I just see them, we've seen it. Was it a freak result against Brighton, or was it just Aston Villa? They had a great result against Liverpool. They had a tremendous result. Was it against Arsenal? Oh, I'm getting that wrong. But then, they're just Leeds getting beat. They've lost 3 straight at home, and I just see them as being a little, too up and down.
Just to interrupt, Ben, Hersey has said he's got to go watch I'm a Celebrity. I do question that he's watching I'm a Celebrity over us, but just if you're still here, Hersey, you can tune in on YouTube to listen again. We'll be putting this out on Ben Ginnery YouTube Premier Pundits. Wait, is it called Premier Injuries, Premier Pundits? It'll be on YouTube anyway. Just search Ben Dinnery and it will come up. But for sure, we'll also be putting it on Ben's Twitter page, so you can find it for sure. But have a good night. Enjoy I'm a Celebrity, and also enjoy our up-to-date information tomorrow at your own kind of time when you can listen to it. But yeah, just continue your point on Aston Villa, because I do get there's a reluctance there.
Yeah, I mean, look, as it currently stands, I'm sitting on Martinez and I'm in Barkley. If I was to go anywhere else, I would probably be looking at maybe the defensive assets, just because that you're getting a little bit of value there, and they're certainly looking a lot tighter than they have done for basically since Project Restart. It's been night and day since Aston Villa got promoted. So I do like them in that respect, but going forward, I'm still not sold on Ollie Watkins. Jack is head and shoulders. He would be my pick. But the ownership, he goes against my anti-template, anti-point movement at this moment in time. So I see the appeal, but I'm looking at the fixtures as well, and look, the problem with the fixture difficulty rating as it currently stands on the website, it rarely is black and white. The lines are all blurry. You have Burnley there as what would be in terms of the difficulty as a green, that's a good chance for 3 points. But Burnley aren't giving up many chances. They've had a lot of players back from injury. They're looking a lot more solid under Sean Dyche in the last few weeks. And it's also Villa Park, on the back of, like I say, 3 defeats already. This is a big game for them this weekend against West Ham. I think that would be a good barometer to see where they are. I would probably suggest that both teams are in and around that, the same types of level. Barring the top maybe 5, 6, or 7, then everybody pretty much in the rest of that league, is on a par. Maybe with all due respect, maybe the Fulhams and the West Broms are slightly cut adrift from the rest.
I mean, it's a good point as well. That West Ham Villa game is going to be an interesting one. I call it the litmus test, you call it the barometer. But 2 of the best attacks so far this season, but also 2 of the best defences. I think the interesting thing is obviously West Ham might be the one to tip if any team is going to win for victory, because they've been in the better form in like the real kind of recent fixtures. But I could see that one as a 0-0 draw, and I'm kind of happy that I own defensive assets from both. I mean, if one player is going to make the difference, it will probably be Grealish. So for that game, it's probably not a good one to bring it in, but it's a fair point there, Ben, that a lot of these kind of easy fixtures, this fixture difficulty rating is so nuanced, because it might be good for your attack, but it might not be good for your defence. There's a really weird kind of mix this season, and I think, you've highlighted another point there. Brighton's poor form, but they got that victory against Aston Villa, which was totally out of the blue. Now, something that I've said so far this season is that Brighton are producing good statistics, but they're just not meeting them. And I think some people were kind of like, oh, finally Brighton are meeting their statistics. I think I'll get some of their assets in. But my feeling is that Brighton's assets haven't been doing well because they're not a very good side. Yes, they produce some good data, they play very nice football, but realistically, I think there's a big problem with the goalkeeper, Matt Ryan. He just doesn't save enough. His save percentage was quite low. And going into this weekend, we're going to talk about captaincy picks a little bit later, but I'm excited that Salah's back. I'm really excited. They got such poor form against top sides. They have no clean sheets in their 5 games against top half sides this season. So it's going to be a fun one. And yes, they got good underlying data, but realistically, I don't think the Seagulls have turned a corner. Do you think at all, Ben?
No, they were very good value for their 3 points last weekend. Fully deserved the win without question. But no, for me, they've still got that inconsistencies. The return of Lewis Dunk last weekend was a big bonus. However, this weekend the Seagulls have arguably lost their player to season to date, or almost their player since Project Restart, in the fact that Lamptey will be suspended for a game after picking up 2 yellow cards. So he's going to be a huge loss. We may see the return of Trossard as well. But I'm with you, and if in another realm, in another world, I wasn't anti-template, then Mo Salah would probably be my captaincy pick.
Yeah.
He's coming off the back of, what was picked up by the media. We know that he tested positive for COVID. The media were looking for a story. It alleged that it came from, he wasn't social distance at his brother's wedding. Jurgen Klopp, cut that story dead before anybody it could delve any further. He said, "It is what it is. I understand the pressures, and my players do extremely well under difficult circumstances. We're a nice, tight, compact unit," and that was it. He turned it into a non-story. Now, if I was Mo Salah, I would be looking at my manager, and I've got his implicit backing. There's no questions there. I'd want to be going out and repaying that faith in the manager, and also showing everybody else, this is what Liverpool have missed. This is what I'm back for. And it wouldn't surprise me if he got at least a couple of goals this weekend.
Yeah, the thing is, they produced that sensational performance against Leicester. I mean, what will they do to Brighton, who are not even in the same league as the Foxes? And I think, as you said, what will be particularly worrying is that Lamptey is gone. So Robertson, he'll be given a free rein to run down that left-hand side. Mane will profiteer off of that situation as well. But also there'll be plenty of good service for Salah, for Jota, possibly for Mino as well. This could be a big kind of scoreline there. So I think, it's a positive one to look at it in terms of captaincies. But I think there's some interesting captaincy debates this weekend. But before we get to that, there's actually a few kind of defensive situations that I wanted to talk about. I think both Manchesters are good for defensive assets. We kind of seen the red and the blue side of Manchester have good fixtures, but also the Sky Blues have some really kind of great defensive data so far this season. Cancelo with his creativity, but I don't think Manchester United performed too badly this weekend. Obviously, it is West Brom, but they're slowly kind of gathering pace. They're kind of getting more back to themselves. And also with, can you confirm that Alex Telles is now kind of fully fit and hopefully pushing his way into that Manchester United squad?
I think there's always going to be a period of adjustment. Players coming into a new environment, new team, new league. So that's hard first and foremost. And we've also had Telles initially was self-isolated because he came in from a country who was on our quarantine list. He then tested positive, so he's had a severely disrupted start to his United career. And he's almost been thrown in at the deep end following the setback for Luke Shaw. So while he may not be 100% in terms of where he personally feels he'd like to be, he will be improving on a daily basis. And with every competitive minute under his belt, he'll be getting better and better. So I like the early, what I've seen of Alex Telles early doors. He looks impressive, as well as defensive returns. He does like to get forward as well. He's a player that I can see can flourish over these coming game weeks. And like I say, he may be only around about 75, 80%, 85%, towards his full potential. But that will come maybe over the next 3 or 4 games.
And I think he is a pretty good asset to own once he kind of gets that full fitness. But at the moment, the one that you've got in your squad, the one that I recommend people to get was Harry Maguire. And I like his goal potential as well. He is the target for set pieces. And I think he's a good one. Obviously, with Man City, I'm liking Cancelo, Diaz. We've kind of talked through that over the last few weeks. Great underlying data for that Manchester City defence, even though their attack hasn't been too good. And Cancelo, ridiculous kind of creativity data. But an interesting one that I wanted to actually highlight as well is Eric Dyer. Now, he's kind of a firm fixture in that Tottenham back line. He's 4.9 in price. Now, I think maybe over the next few game weeks might not be too much of a bright one to get in because of the difficulty in fixtures. But then I do also have to ask the question, last weekend, Tottenham held out Manchester City. They're obviously not as good as they were, but it was a clean sheet. It was a fantastic kind of performance. And this is Jose Mourinho. He knows how to play big games. He knows how to get results. And Eric Dyer is one of his boys. He loves the guy. He wanted to buy him at Manchester United. If you've watched the kind of documentary about Tottenham, he's one of his favourites. And I think at his price of 4.9, I'm kind of salivating over that one. Obviously, the bigger kind of attractive one for a little bit more money is Reguilon, and I think he's going to be a good own this season as well. Really creative, and he seems to have settled in well with the team. He's the kind of player that Kane will feed off well because he's crossing the balls in, which Kane can kind of get his head onto. Do you like either of those choices there, Ben?
This is where I have difficulty separating the real life, the reality of the situation, and fantasy. And I must admit, I'm not a fan of Eric Dyer per se as a footballer.
Fair enough.
As a fantasy asset, yes, I do see the appeal. The only concern that I would have, as well as the downturn in maybe the fixtures, is the fact that Tottenham have lost Toby Alderweireld, and he's going to be a big miss for them. Now, initial timeline could be potentially up to a month, so that means you've got Dyer who's more or less nailed, and whether Jose decides to go for Davinson Sanchez, who again, not a big fan of his. I think he's got too many mistakes in his locker, or he goes to, is it Joe Rodon? and I must admit, I hold my hands up, and I don't know a great deal about him. It's one thing performing at the championship, um, you know, and then another to make a step up to the top flight, where every decision, every performance, every pass is scrutinised, across the world. So that'll be interesting, and you know, that may be to the detriment of Eric Dyer's, points returns in FPL, maybe while Roden is settling in, or certainly while Toby Alderweireld is sidelined.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and it kind of evaluates the context of the team. Tottenham, I think, have found their groove. Obviously, going forward, they've kind of been a little bit tempered recently, but out of 3 of their 4 last games, they've kept a clean sheet. And this was a time when people have been questioning them. I, for one, put my hands up and say I was seriously considering getting Son out, because I thought, well, turn of fixtures, I'll keep Kane, but Son, is more expendable. But they've continued that good form, and I think they're really questioning the doubters this year. That they're really putting it out there, and maybe the run of form will come to an end. As an Arsenal fan, I hope it does. But in terms of it, these fixtures, coming up, again, it's the context of the situation. Chelsea, obviously a North London derby, but Kane is not afraid in those situations, and they'll put in a fierce fight. And with a lot of these derbies as well, we know that they're kind of dead rubbers. They come out as a 0-0, they're quite boring affairs. Arsenal, the next game week, another fierce one, but Arsenal haven't scored since, I think, game week 6, and that was a penalty. They're in dreadful form. Crystal Palace can't really score at the moment. The only ones that are kind of a worry there are Liverpool and Leicester. And then the rest, are relatively good fixtures for that Tottenham defence. I like his price point. I think that's one of the key kind of pulls for me. I also kind of like it for you because it's a maverick move. And I think, we like these differential maverick moves there. Mm-hmm. But genuinely, he's in a top 4 or a top 6 team, however you want to define Tottenham now these days. But also, he is going to be playing. He's nailed at 4.9. That is kind of Tyrone Mings, Esre Konsaland, where you think, well, Villa might not get as many clean sheets, but Tottenham are much more in the mix of it. So I get your kind of worries, but I also do think that it's Jose Mourinho. He loves a defensive performance, and he'll revel off the fact that he's doing it with Tottenham as well. So there's a lot to think about there. I'm not shooting down your very legitimate concerns there, Ben, because you're dead right. Alderweireld is out, but Jose can adapt. He's the ultimate pragmatist. An interesting one, and maybe one that you can fill us more in because he's in your team, as in your actual team that you support. He's a Magpie. Jamal Lewis. Now, interesting one there. I think factoring in that I'd say 50% of their fixtures are looking good in the next 6 games. But again, he's a bit like Dyer, that he's a cheap facilitator, 4.3. And the reason why I put him in there as well is because I look at the Newcastle defensive data. Yes, obviously, this is a Newcastle team that's only kept 1 clean sheet so far this season, but they're not allowing a lot of big chances. So they defend deep. I think Jamal Lewis has the potential to get involved in the attack every so often. In terms of it, 12 big chances conceded so far this season. 4.3, is that a risk to get him in as a facilitator, Ben?
I think you know yourself, Jason, when you're talking about Arsenal, your hometown club, you seem to be hypercritical of your own hometown club. It's almost your right, to be able to criticise them more than you probably would any other team. And it's difficult maybe to be objective when looking at those players. Newcastle players are a hard sell for me at this moment in time. Callum Wilson is probably the only player that I would, really consider, realistically bringing into my team. Alan San Maxim is way off the boil. With not many clean sheets floating around this season, generally, if you're looking maybe at a goalkeeper and just Caldolo does pull off a lot of saves, and he does get the odd saves bonus. If I was going to go anywhere with the back line, it might have been Caldolo. However, whoever priced him up at the beginning of the season, he was at 5 million. I mean, I think there must have been sniff and glue at the time, considering he hadn't played for, I think it was over 2 years before he came back for his first Premier League start with Dubravka sidelined. So I don't know what was going on there. But he would be the only one really that I would give any serious consideration to. They do look a little bit more solid with 5 at the back. Excuse me. But it wouldn't surprise me if Bruce changes things up slightly again, and if he goes out to a 4-2-3-1, then I see a little bit. I think it leaves us a little bit open to the counter attack. I think it's a difficult game down at Selhurst Park. Regardless of the fact that the home side will be without Wilfried Zaha, and Lewis isn't a player, really that I'd be looking to invest in if the truth be known.
Yeah, I mean, it's more in my head. He's a facilitator. I'd only play him. He's one of those players that you wouldn't mind benching, but at least he will be getting a run out. At least he's kind of nailed for minutes. He's kind of one of those players that you yourself have kept in your squad, Ben, just because you know that they'll get minutes. You probably won't play them, but at least they're kind of in there to, especially during this COVID period. I thought he was an interesting one to evaluate because at 4.3 he's one of the cheapest defenders. And I just kind of want to maybe finish on something that we started on, and it was actually the Burnley defence. Looking at them so far this season, I've been impressed with their underlying data, and finally their kind of results are matching up to it. And I would say from game week 11 onwards, they should be really considered as a good run of fixtures and a decent defensive asset. You can get some really cheap defensive Clarets assets in there. The metrics are good. They continue to be impressive. And, this is Sean Dyche. He knows how to play the game. He knows how to see out matches. Now, obviously, they've had quite a few injuries, but they bounced back from that. That's what's impressed me even more. And we were a little bit critical at the start of the season, weren't we, Ben, kind of saying they're probably one of the favourites to go down because they haven't bought. And it could really happen. They could get a few more injuries again and then their season goes off the boil. But I'm just talking in pure kind of statistics here. The side have the second best XG conceded data so far this season. I think that's phenomenal stuff. Obviously, at the start of the season, I think that they let in quite a few extra goals because of the injuries, the weird situation with COVID. We saw every team doing it. But now I think Burnley have really hit their stride. Pope is once again back to his biblical, religious levels of being able to hold out points.
However, I'll interject. Newsflash, Nick Pope is expected to miss out this weekend, which is obviously big news from down at Turf Moor. He picked up a head injury in the win over Crystal Palace, took a knock on the back of the head. It was the bang that required stitches, so there was quite a deep laceration in there. And although there's nothing too serious or underlying with that, that quite rightly they're going to err on the side of caution, and it could be that Peacock Farrell, I believe, comes in for his Premier League debut. So, if anybody has missed that news, then we're not expecting Nick Pope to feature this weekend as it currently stands.
Well, this weekend as well, it's against Manchester City, so I'd advise not to get any Burnley assets in anyway. And in many ways, that makes me happy as a Sterling owner. That buoys my kind of optimism that hopefully Manchester City can kind of almost kickstart their season because they've been so poor so far. But I think when Pope comes back between the sticks, with the form of the team at the back, I think they're going to be really good assets to own. Game week 11 onwards, second lowest big chances so far this season. And again, kind of contextualizing it in terms of the fixture difficulty rating, the kind of measure for it, I think, has almost been a little bit too harsh, because it's kind of put it as a super difficult run for Burnley from game week 11 onwards. But I like to evaluate those games. Everton on their day can be kind of managed, and without the likes of Digne, and they have had poor form recently. Arsenal don't score a lot of goals, so that could be a clean sheet. Aston Villa, I mean, they're popping in and out of form. Wolves don't seem to be scoring a lot of goals either. And then Leeds, these are all games here that they've highlighted as potentially difficult. But if you then contextualise the actual form of these teams so far this season, obviously Man City are the hardest of that bunch. But I'd say, it's not too bad. And you could possibly be looking at a Burnley asset, because the fixtures don't worry me too much. And some of them are at 4.5 price, some of them are a little bit higher. I don't think you'd need to invest too much in the higher priced. So I think Burnley are ones to keep an eye on. I mean, have you changed your tune a little bit like me, Ben? Or are you still very kind of anti the Burnley assets, which, is a continuation of your previous thoughts?
I am warming to them slightly. It was a culmination of what was happening on field with the injuries, but also what was going on off the field as well. There was a little bit of disharmony, I think, with Sean Dyche. The contract negotiations and those three players leaving in the summer, not being given any kind of transfer budget to speak of. Now there's a lot of talk or suggestion that Burnley might be taken over. So new investors coming at the club. And I think that has lifted the spirit in the move around the camp. I think that definitely has had an impact, although, I'm sure Sean Dyche will say, we're not affected by that, but it certainly has. They seem to have learned by the mistakes. I've read today that they're already looking to tie down players on contracts, well ahead of any potential shutdown and those players sort of leaving on a free. So again, there's been positive moves on that front, and I think that's important. And yeah, I mean, when you look at the price points, in particular, maybe the Charlie Taylor would be one that springs to mind. Then they become hard to ignore, because I looked at those fixtures and really, you take Manchester City out of it, because on any given day, Manchester City are able to produce a performance that can wipe some of the best teams in Europe off. And I think, if I do recall correctly, Manchester City have actually beaten Burnley 5-0 on both occasions on the last two times they've played. So we forget about that, but the rest of those fixtures, I wouldn't be overly concerned on any of those. And what are we looking at? Maybe 5 or 6 game weeks. You can quite easily see them picking up at least 2, possibly 3 clean sheets and getting some points on the board. So, look, I do see the appeal, and I think maybe going down into that Burnley back line isn't a bad move at all.
And I think the interesting thing with the Burnley assets as well is when they do get a clean sheet, they pick up so many bonus points. Pope is a bonus point magnet. He seems a little bit high price for me, so I wouldn't get him in as a goalkeeping asset. But the others, Charlie Taylor is a great one, and he seems to pick up a fair bonus point here and there when there's a clean sheet. But also he has the capacity, to also get involved in the attacks. That's the way the Burnley team play. And I think they're a bonus point magnet as well. Is the Burnley system is to allow a lot of chances, but not of high quality. And so the Burnley defenders are doing a lot, but it's not dangerous. So, for me, it seems like a really interesting own. I'll be looking at which assets I might move on. I think maybe Matt Targett from Aston Villa, maybe James Justin from Leicester, because there's the potential. Obviously, Pereira's not coming back straight away, but might be good now because I've got a couple of free transfers just to move him out before that likelihood. But then they've got a good run of fixtures as well. Again, reiterating my point from last week, I like my team, even though they really, hit me hard last week with some very poor points. But I think one of the problems was my captaincy choice, and that is what we're going to get into now. So I think the big one for me as a Salah owner, I think anybody who's got Mane, and maybe even if you don't own Salah or Mane, maybe even for you, Ben, maybe a Jota captaincy might not be absolutely amiss here. But obviously you're doing your thing with Rashford all season. But in terms of it, the data for Liverpool in that Leicester game was incredible. And Salah is now returning. I think he's got to be absolute favourite, Salah, for this game week's captaincy.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult game week in terms of the fixtures. There's very few players that I've maybe highlighted as being standout or potentially standout performers. As you alluded to before, the derbies are tough games to predict. It's quite often, the build up and the hype and the supporters getting on edge. It never really seems to come to fruition, and it'll be difficult to pick out, players in that type of environment. With the lack of crowd and supporters behind, it may just change the dynamic of the game, and we may see a really entertaining sort of Chelsea and Tottenham game there. Time will tell. The Werners and the Ziyechs and the Harry Kanes and the Sons, they're all players that inherently would typically appeal, but just I think they're risky, and I think you're right. Liverpool look to have that standout fixture. For some, that midday kickoff on Saturday may be a little bit off-putting, but it isn't the first game of the weekend. That honour is afforded to Crystal Palace and Newcastle. So, rest assured, you've only got 8 games after that one's being played. Rashford's my captain, but if I was going to go for a vice, I think it's going to be Diogo Jota with that, just because I think, potentially there could be some big numbers on the board.
Yeah, I think there could be good numbers on the board, and I think the choice is really clear over the Man City players, even though I got Sterling, and the Burnley fixture looks tantalising, knowing that Pope is out as well. But the form is there for Liverpool. They are the best attack so far this season. They're one of the best teams in Europe at the moment, so it seems a no-brainer for me in terms of this. And Salah will be, he's on the penalties, if there's a penalty kind of situation here. It's all really positive for it. I just hope that he doesn't let me down like damned Grealish last week. I mean, I shouldn't really even have Grealish in my team as a proud Irishman. I should castigate him out. But one player that I think is another one, a firm favourite in the communities, 25% own, Jamie Vardy. I mean, Fulham have conceded the joint most goals this season so far. They're basically the whipping boys like they previously were. This could be a high-scoring affair, and Leicester will probably want a bounce back. They're obviously a fantastic side with some really good players. Obviously, a few problems with injuries here and there, but their main potent attack force is Jamie Vardy, and he's looking just as good as ever. So, no question marks over him there. I think he's a good captaincy choice as well, maybe among one of the finest. If I had Salah or Mane and Jamie Vardy my side, I would still pick Salah purely because the form and the fixture is good for them, whereas Leicester have been kind of up and down a little bit so far this season. Obviously they were near to getting top of the table, but they've had problems with their injuries. Jamie Vardy, the way he plays, he doesn't turn up in every game, and he's a man who really kind of jumps on small amount of opportunities, but it's kind of frustrating to watch. So I wouldn't put him as my captain for this game week, but I think he's still a great pick, and maybe possibly a good way to fire yourself up, because a lot of these premium assets, Bruno Fernandes, De Bruyne, are going to be highly owned, highly captained, and he could be a slightly more differential way to move up. Do you like the pick of Jamie Vardy, Ben?
Look, how many times have we had this conversation? I like Jamie Vardy if I'm not watching Leicester play, because when you're watching one of your fantasy assets playing, you want that player to be involved. You want them to be touching the ball. You want them to be doing something. Jamie Vardy could touch the ball 3 times in 90 minutes and score a hat-trick. He's that type of player. And I just find it a little bit frustrating. The only concern for me, and they've done really well, to date this season, it's just, their away game tonight in the Europa League. Yes, granted, it's only in Portugal. It's just a short hop on a flight. But, it's this cumulative minutes. It's the fatigue factor. And you're going from different environments, different changing rooms. It's just this accumulation of the travel and the upset and the, moving out of the routine. And you're not guaranteed to get a performance. It may take 20 minutes, half an hour, a full half even, to settle down into the flow. And in the top flight in the Premier League, sometimes you never afforded that luxury, and the game could be gone in the blink of an eye. It could be over in that time. So for me, Leicester are just a little bit of a risky punt that so I have reservations about, tying up too many assets or delving too deep into my little piggyback to bring in some of their players, just because when I do, I want to be confident that I'm getting returns. And with Vardy, who is high-end, premium, he's up there in terms of his price point, then there's just not enough. Psychologically, there's just not enough. Although his data, in terms of his points returns, would say, he is worth the investment. I cannot see. He needs to be one of those anonymized picks where you just say, look, this guy, this is his points return, this is his price. What do you think? And he'd go, I'll have some of that. But when I say, but I cannot make that leap of faith at this moment in time.
I'm trying to rank my brain, because last week we made a bet, didn't we? And I'd make an apology if a player did really well. Which player was it? I can't remember now. Maybe you can rack your brain, think of it whilst I...
Well,
do you remember?
Yeah, oh, no, was it not Tielemans?
Yes, it was.
It was Tielemans.
You said if he got double-digit haul 3 weeks in a row, that I would have to go on Twitter and apologise to all your fans.
But he did get a double-digit return. He didn't get a 1 in a 1. So yeah, he got a 2-point return, I think it was.
So, I suppose that's a 1 in a 1. We'll count it for this week.
And now he's gone out with team, so it just goes to show, what a difference 7 days can make.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, the bet's still on. I will allow if he does maybe 2 weeks on the trot of double digits. We'll extend it just a little bit. But
any 2 game weeks. I tell you what, he's going to score this weekend. There you go. He reckon 100% nailed guarantee score this weekend.
I hope not, for your sanity's sake, because that would be a right old... that's the thing, though. Now, it almost seems like the FPL gods are there just to punish you. You read so many comments in the community. They're like, I've taken so-and-so out this week, so they're definitely going to do well. And you're like, it does feel like that sometimes. It's so dreadful. But one that, we have mentioned, Harry Kane, I think is an interesting captaincy option. He's been in such good form. Obviously, the last couple of game weeks, he's not been as kind of explosive as he was, but we know the problems with Chelsea defensively, but they seem to have improved. But again, it's not one that I would probably stick the captaincy on, just because of it, the potential both sides not wanting to lose. I think a lot of teams would go into that match, Tottenham and Chelsea, that they've got a lot to lose. If they lose it, they'll lose their momentum, they'll lose credibility, and I could definitely see that one being a draw. The only other one, which I think has been popular in the community, but I'm questioning it a little bit, Bruno Fernandes. I mean, I worry about this one because Southampton has improved so much, not letting a goal at home since game week 2. And Southampton have the 4th best XG conceded so far this season. Couple that with the fact that Manchester United seem to not be able to score goals apart from penalties at the moment. I don't think I could justify sticking the captain on him. And then the other one that I don't know if the community thought about too much, but Calvert-Lewin against Leeds. I think that's a strong one because obviously Leeds have one of the leakest defences. They've got one of the biggest XG conceded. A lot of people are saying that obviously Calvin Phillips is back, so that might be a big boost to their defensiveness. I think a problem with Everton is obviously their own defence, but that could be a high-scoring game, that one. And Calvert-Lewin has been on sensational form. I think he's the quickest to get to 10 goals in a Premier League season ever. I wouldn't knock him. You know, he's on such good form that a captaincy shout there as well. I mean, what do you think about those three? Kane, Fernandes and Calvert-Lewin, Ben?
I mean, just on the Calvert-Lewin, you know, he seemed a lot of he's high ownership. He's probably up there with the greatest in the game at the moment. It's 60%. I would love to know the actual stat on how many managers have actually captained Calvert-Lewin. He's only blanked in one game week so far this season. That's how good his form has been. And even when, you know, Everton have dipped a little bit, he was still producing, he was still delivering. And we talked about the return of Richarlison. You know, Everton are a different beast. Take Lucas Digne out of the equation now, you know, one of their main supply lines. And this is going to be interesting to see what happens and how they respond and who comes in. I think it's Nkundu, if I've probably butchered his name. I must admit, I don't know a great deal. He did play in the Carabao Cup, and I think he did play one league game this season, possibly against Newcastle, if I recall, when Newcastle actually won. It's going to be difficult for Everton, and the derby puts me off Harry Kane. And Bruno's just it doesn't matter how Bruno's playing. It doesn't even matter how Manchester United are playing. They're always going to get a penalty. And, you know, unlike midweek in the Champions League, I cannot see Bruno giving up another one and handing it across the box. So, look, like I said before, this week for me it's very difficult. There are few, you know, really standout players. The Manchester City's got a great fixture, but they just don't have that form, whether collectively or individually. And therefore, I'd just default back to Liverpool because they're ticking all of the boxes. And I find it hard to look elsewhere.
I just got a little bit of a worry now because I've looked at the timings of the Liverpool fixture, and of course it's the early kickoff, 12:30 on a Saturday. And as we well know, Mohandas Gandhi has always warned us against the early kickoff. It's the one that you don't go for, and now it's given me a little bit of squeaky bum time. I'm really worried with that because it's basically the second of the game week. I mean, it makes sense with data, it makes sense with the fixture, everything makes sense apart from the fact that it is the 12:30 kickoff on Saturday. I mean, does that temper your nerves a little bit there, Ben?
Is it the early kickoff on the Saturday, or is it the first fixture of the game week?
It's not the first fixture of the game week. That is your boys Palace versus Newcastle. So,
therefore, like I say, is it? For me, I'm not sure if the issue is the fact that it's Saturday at 12 o'clock or the fact that inherently it's normally the first game week of any round.
Okay.
So if Newcastle are, you know, kicking things off on Friday night at Selhurst Park, then that almost removes, well, that totally removes the any issues that I have about being the first game week, you know. So that doesn't really bother me as much, if the truth be known. And I'm expecting a big performance from Salah. I'm expecting a big performance from Liverpool, particularly after what happened midweek as well in the Champions League. You know, again, a disappointing result. Disappointing performance. I mean, touching upon Nico Williams, by the way, I cannot see him being anywhere near that Liverpool start 11 this weekend. I just think he's just a little bit too inexperienced. He looked a little bit exposed, and it may be that Milner has to drop in there, and maybe Curtis Jones comes into that Liverpool midfield, or Jordan Henderson if pass fit. Tomorrow we'll just have to wait and see.
So let's move it into the final bit of the show here, and we give an update on our transfer plans. Interesting kind of discussions that we've had with some differentials, some good choices. We already know that you've done one, Ben. Is it limited to just one this game week?
Yeah, I haven't. I refuse to take any hits point blank. Unless if it meant I was going to go out with maybe 9 or 10 players, then yes. But I've got a decent bench. I've only got Ross Bartley, who's flagged as a concern this weekend. He is ruled out. Elsewhere, I've got a fully fit squad. So can you imagine taking the hit after pulling just 1 week after your wild card? Now that really would be the worst wild card in history. So I've got me transfer already done this week, and looks like I've already got it in place for the week after, with Martinez being shipped out as well. So that's my plans, and I'm not looking any further ahead than that. The COVID situation, we've heard it from Newcastle's training ground that there's been 3 players self-isolating so far this week. Now Steve Bruce wouldn't reveal, name those individuals for confidentiality reasons. So, and these are issues that are going to be cropping up, throughout until we get a vaccine. Even with the best bubbles in the world, footballers are certainly not immune to COVID-19.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, will they be given priorities is a question that a lot of people are asking in terms of the COVID vaccine. But moving it back to the transfer plans, and just one point that I wanted to say about Newcastle is I saw a really good joke about how Newcastle fans were saying that, moving from tier 1 to tier 3 in a matter of months was the Sunderland experience. So, it's obviously, there's the real problem for you guys up in Newcastle that you're still in tier 3. But, does that make you feel a little better or worse that you can at least have a laugh at that team over in Wearside before I say Tyneside again?
I mean, look, we're always laughing at Sunderland. They're just one big long joke. He says with tongue in cheek, I'm sure, if the shoe was on the other foot, then Sunderland would have a lot to say about us. The reality of the situation is, and it probably saddens me to say it now, Sunderland have fallen so far from grace. They're a non-entity now. It used to be, there were our rivals that you would think about, and you'd look at the results and you'd hope they're getting beaten. Now, I couldn't even tell you how they're performing from week to week. I couldn't tell you who their players are. I'm just not even concerned with them because they've just, slipped so far down off the radar that they're not even worth mentioning. Yeah. So, and that's probably sad in terms of our rivalry, but it is what it is. Unlucky.
It is unlucky. They should have supported a better side, shouldn't they? I mean, that's what I always say about the Tottenham fans. They always go on about the glory years under Pochettino, but they didn't win anything, did they? Whereas we were in our worst rut and we got how many FA Cups? Anyway, let's move it on to my transfer plans there before we get more into derby talks. Well, we could do that all night. And the thing is, again, I like my team. And I might be considering burning a transfer, which is really odd. I mean, I don't need to do transfers. Every transfer that I'm considering, I go, well, I don't need to do that. That player's good. They've got good long-term fixtures. Looking at them individually, McCarthy this week kind of showed how good he is. Realistically, I wouldn't do a goalkeeper transfer unless absolutely really necessary or wild card. Walker Peters is great, trundling along, picking up clean sheets here and there. I would say, the Manchester United game is a little bit difficult, but then Man United haven't been great going forward, so I could potentially see a clean sheet there. And then going after that, still a good run of fixtures. The only difficult one between now and game week 16 is Manchester City. So not too worried about that. Justin, in terms of Leicester, really good game this weekend. And good games in the medium term. Masuaku, I've waxed lyrical about him. I'm not going to get him out at the moment. Again, good fixtures, good data. Diaz, good fixtures, good data. Son, somebody that I was considering, but he's kind of proved himself against City. And looking at the fixtures coming up, contextualise it. These teams are beatable and scoreable games. Grealish, Salah, Sterling. The only weak one out of them is probably Sterling. And then my front line of Kane and Calvert-Lewin, the two of or probably the two most informed strikers, I don't need to move any of them. And they've got good fixtures as well. Maybe Kane less so, but I don't need to move him on. And then on my bench, I've got Matt Target. Maybe I could improve my bench fodder, but I don't really want to waste transfers on them. I don't know. It's just a weird one. Maybe if it goes down to the wire and I don't have any transfers to do, I might improve Dell Stevens. But apart from that, nothing that I can think to improve this team there, Ben. I mean, do you have any thoughts on any players apart from Raheem?
No, look, I do feel that you've bought a little bit too much into Raheem, and we're looking at, and I've done the same with Aubameyang. We feel we've invested so much. We look at the fixtures and we're expecting something big to happen. Look, I hope it does for you in this instance. I would really like to see him, produce, but it's that fine balancing act. I think that's the difference between maybe doing well in the Premier League and then, really exceeding and becoming those top 1%. As it's being able to get into those players. The class is permanent with a lot of them. How you win fantasy is on form, and being able to dip in and out and pick those players up when they're on a streak, that's the knack. And being able to get rid of those players when they're not producing, that in itself is a little bit of a skill. It's hard for me to look at your team, given the situation that I'm in and what's been happening, and give any sort of critique that you can walk away from and, take anything from your performances, other than a blip last weekend, which it can happen to anybody. Then you've been pretty solid throughout the campaign. And as well as me, we don't pick players for a short-term punt, rarely. A 1 and 2 game. These selections are done with one eye on, upcoming fixtures for maybe 4, 5, and 6 game weeks. So, just because we have this anomaly, this bad round, this bad return, we know that, the sod's law, that it should rectify itself over the coming game weeks.
Yeah, I'm very positive that the team will do better this game week. And like you said, all the reasons why I brought these players in were because of longevity, form, apart from Raheem Sterling. But I told you that I've given him 2 game weeks to prove himself against 2 of the nicest fixtures that Man City have. If he doesn't turn up in those games, then he's gone. He's a dinosaur, and the money will be going elsewhere. And then that gives me a bit of fun. But also, at the moment, I don't need to do transfers, so I'll probably have to when I get rid of Sterling, if I get rid of Sterling. And then I can really work on areas of my team. I could take a -4, so do 3 transfers, and improve maybe a few areas of my team that in 3 or 2 game weeks time might need working on. So I'm pretty settled on that. And I think we can settle it here tonight, Ben. We've had a really good discussion here. Some great differentials, some fantastic stats, and of course, the most up-to-date injury news to help guide the community. So, make sure to tune in every week. Get your questions in. Hersey has been involved, but there's been quite a few of you. And the best kind of way to tune into this is live on Hot Mic. If you're watching on YouTube, it is great to kind of listen to us, but you can ask us the questions live on Hot Mic. You can get it to us and we can answer whatever queries you have. You might be thinking, that Trezeguet is a good option, or you might be wanting to send us a message and be like, that is absolutely crazy. Why would you ever say something like that? But the most interactive, greatest way is through Hot Mic, and the app is for free. So make sure, when you download it, to put in the Ben10 download code as well, and it will subscribe you to us so that you can see whenever we go live. And we've got the Wednesday show, we've got the Thursday show, but also we go live at the weekend to have a bit of fun analysing the live matches. So we usually do the latest game. So I guess next weekend it will probably be the Aston Villa West Ham game that we've actually talked about, the potential dead rubber 0-0. So I hope there's...
Let's hope not.
Let's hope not, but also I kind of hope so, because I've got defensive assets in both those teams there. But yes, do get involved. But as always, thank you so much for your support tonight. Hersey YT with his actual kind of monetary tip as well. We've been giving verbal tips. He gave us a monetary tip, and we're a high as a kite at the moment because of that. So thank you so much, Hersey YT, and thank you everybody for listening. But it's a goodbye from me here, Ben.
And it's a goodbye from me. Fantastic send off. Yeah, just echo those thoughts, Jay. Really enjoyed it. Really informative. Some great insight. Love the stats that you keep on throwing our way every session. So for that, I thank you. Now, if you missed the beginning of the show, you'll know that my dashboard has went a little bit crazy. So I would normally just phase out quite nicely with the ending and then have a big chat with Jason. Unfortunately, I do not have that option at this moment in time. So, Jason, I'm actually going to have to just shut down the website to cut off the camera. Hopefully that doesn't affect any kind of downloads that we're able to do. I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. So, but from me, it's a goodbye. And Jason, it's a goodbye, mate. And I will be in touch, and I'll send you a text, and hopefully the dashboard is back up and running very, very soon.
Yeah.
So until Monday, everybody have a great weekend, and hopefully it's going to be green arrows all around.
Cheerio, everyone.
It's for now. Bye.